Hi, my name is Joe, and my friends in the RPG community have tricked me into making this series of videos about how to write an adventure. Last time, I talked about making lists to write an adventure, and in this video, I'm going to talk about something even cooler than lists, making an outline. So in the writing community, the authors, we sometimes talk about how some of us are plotters and some of us are pantsers, meaning some of us like to plot out our novels and some of us just write by the seat of our pants, which is wild to me and I can't do. I've always been a plotter. I've always planned out my novels and I've always planned out my adventures too. So that's just how my brain works. So, the next thing I would do in writing my adventure is to write an outline. And since I've already done all of this research and made lists, making an outline is actually going to be super easy, barely an inconvenience. We're just going to take all of the stuff in our lists and cram it all together. Step one, shuffle the locations. So, first, we're going to look at that long list of possible locations that we made, and hopefully, we have a lot more than we need. And hopefully, just by having the list in front of us, we can already get some ideas about which of these seem cool and useful to us for the adventure that we're already kind of thinking about. So, step one is just go through the list and decide which of these locations are cool and useful, which seem boring or not that appropriate, and which don't seem like they should be in our adventure at all. We're going to start sliding them up and down the list. So think back to your story idea, all the way back from the vision, and ask yourself a few questions. What locations do you need in order to make the story work? Which are required? What locations make sense, which seem appropriate, and would also help make the story seem cooler? And which locations do not make sense and should not be here, would not be helpful? So all the cool and appropriate ones, you slide them to the top of your list, and all of the boring and inappropriate ones, you slide down to the bottom of the list. We're not going to delete them yet, because we might just need a few boring places later on. Step two, we need to add in the people. So next we need to go through our list of people that we made who might appear in the adventure. And we're going to do the same thing as we did with the locations. We're going to see which people sound the most interesting and cool and useful and move them up to the top, and move all of the boring and sort of inappropriate ones, move them down to the bottom. So now we have this list of useful and interesting looking people, and we need to put them in the adventure locations that make the most sense or that seems the most interesting. So, for instance, maybe one of our NPCs is the queen. It would make sense for the queen to be in the throne room, so she could be there. But it also might be interesting if she's in the stables, getting a horse ready so she can escape. Or maybe she's in the dungeon because she was framed for murder. So these are things you can think about. You have these interesting people, you have these interesting places, which make sense and which are interesting, and which do you want to do? Step number three, add the creatures. So now we're going to go through our list of creatures, which is both monsters and mundane plants and animals, and we're going to try to put 1 to 3 of them in every location. So sometimes this is just set dressing. It's just what is appropriate, what should be here, what makes it seem like a living place. And then some of them are interesting that the players are supposed to really interact with. So, for instance, it might make sense for a zombie to be in the graveyard because it's climbing out of a grave. Maybe it makes sense for a goblin to be hiding in the forest because they live in the forest. There should also be sheep in the pasture. There should be onions growing in the garden. The more of these little details that you add, then the more content the GM will have to work with and to play with. And then the more tools the players will have to interact with and to solve puzzles with and to overcome, challenges with. All sorts of stuff that you and I can't plan for. We have no idea what the GM is going to do and what the players are going to do. But the more things that we put on the board for them to play with, the more fun they're definitely going to have. Step 4, we want to save the leftovers. We've put all the cool stuff up in the outline. We've organized. We have the best places. We put the people in interesting places. We've put monsters in interesting and useful places. That's all great. But we also have all this less cool stuff that we keep shoving down to the bottom of our list. We're going to hang on to it for now. Let's chop it off, maybe put it in a second document or just push it down a bunch of pages so it's separated. So we have our good outline of the good stuff we really like, but we're going to hang on to that extra stuff because those leftovers we still might want to use. We might find that it makes sense for there to be a boring room in between 2 interesting rooms, or it may make sense for a boring person to be hanging out in the woods. We don't know yet. We haven't gotten there. But having, again, a long list of resources makes it real easy to just grab something and say, oh, I'll just start plugging holes with this other boring stuff between the cool stuff. Having only cool stuff is kind of like listening to a concert that's only loud. You need a few soft songs in there to balance things out and make it feel natural and more, you know, what you expect. Step five, we need to reorganize the outline. So right now we just have been moving stuff around in a list by what's cool, but now we need to start thinking about what's the right order for all of these things to be happening in. Usually we want to start at the top with wherever the players will start the adventure, and then end wherever the players will end. So usually the first location is at the edge of the adventure space. So that could be the entrance to the dungeon. It could be the first house at the edge of the village, the first grove at the edge of the forest, wherever you would begin physically, naturally. The last location is usually where the players will confront the villain or solve the mystery, or otherwise wrap up the adventure. So this could be at the opposite end from the entrance. It could be just at the far end, or it could be in the center of all the other locations, and the players have been working their way towards that center over the course of the adventure. So once you have the beginning and you have the end, you need to figure out where are all of the other locations. So this could be a good time to start doodling out a rough map, and you can either be putting the other locations where they should logically be, because they're rooms in a building of some kind, or just where it makes sense to build tension. Maybe things are getting more interesting as you go along. Maybe the locations are getting more dynamic or scarier. Whatever makes sense for your adventure. And remember, you can always look at other published adventures to get a sense of how they organize their locations. Should they be spread out evenly? Should they be clumped in certain ways? Should they be paired in certain ways? Who knows? There are lots of ways to do things. You should experiment. You should look around and do whatever feels best to you and makes the most sense. That's about it for outlining. Obviously, you can put a lot of time and energy into this activity. You can be plugging in lots of details from your research. You could be inspired to do even more research and to find more cool things that will connect your different pieces together. This is also a great time to start moving things around because you're getting more and more ideas about how things are connected and how the flow of the adventure will go. So maybe there's a person who has a certain tool from their profession, but you want to separate them and put the tool in one location and the person in another because of some event that separated them. And that would give you clues that lead one to the other. Who knows? Maybe you decide that, oh, maybe it makes sense for there to be two of this kind of profession. Maybe they're rivals. Maybe they're master and apprentice. Maybe they're friends. Who knows? They can be different locations. They can be together. They can have interactions. Again, the more you work with your outline, the more you move the details around and you start to think about each location as a vibrant place with a person and a monster and objects to interact with, the more the scene or the setting or that event will take place in your head as an encounter for your players to play with. So I think you should take some time to really play with your outline. See what feels right. See what inspires you. See if the outline itself is giving you ideas about how the adventure might unfold. And I think that's about it for now. So good luck out there.